Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To carry on with the embryology lectures, I'm gonna cover in this presentation the development of the gonads. I'm Dr. Dalia Saleh, professor and the head of anatomy department at Mansoura University. My objectives will be: first, I will remind you by how the sex is determined in the embryo. Then the development of the gonads in its two stages, the indifferent stage and in the different stage, till we reach the formation of testes and ovaries. And then I'm going to talk about the descent of the testes and the anomalies in the descent of the testes. For sex determination, like I mentioned before in previous videos, first we start with the genetic sex, which is determined at the time of fertilization according to the sex chromosome carried by the sperm that will fertilize the ova. Then we have the gonadal sex, and this is determined by the presence or absence of the Y chromosome. The third step in sex determination is the phenotypic sex, and this is determined according to the hormone secreted by the developed gonad. If the developed gonad was testis, then the hormone secreted from it is testosterone, and this will affect the phenotypic sex into male side. However, if the developing gonad is ovary, then there is no testosterone, then the internal and external genitalia will be directed towards the female side. So the phenotypic sex affects both the internal genitalia and external genitalia. In the indifferent gonads, and again the word indifferent means that you cannot differentiate at this point whether the embryo is male or female, or whether this gonad gonna transform into testis or ovary. They are the same. The indifferent gonads are unspecialized gonads, can develop to either ways, testis or ovary, and they present at the 6th week of development. So let's start with the formation of the indifferent gonad. First, we have something called the genital ridge. Where is the genital ridge? It arises from the intermediate mesoderm, lies on both sides of the midline, between the nephrogenic cord and the root of the dorsal mesentery. So again, this is the dorsal aorta in the middle, and this is the dorsal mesentery, through which the intestine is suspended to the posterior abdominal wall. So this is the midline. On either side of this midline lies the genital ridge. So the genital ridge is part of the intermediate mesoderm that lies between the root of the mesentery and the nephrogenic cord, where the mesonephric kidney will develop in this region. The genital ridge consists of the following: proliferation of the coelomic epithelium. The epithelium that lines the coelomic cavity becomes thickened, and also the intermediate mesoderm or the mesenchymal cells of the intermediate mesoderm will condense underneath this coelomic epithelial proliferation. What happens to this genital ridge to transform into indifferent gonads is the presence or the arrival of something called primordial germ cells. Where are these cells? They appear at the wall of the yolk sac near the allantois around the 4th week of development. So if you look at this diagram, again, this is the hind gut, this is the cloaca, and this is the allantois. So these red dots represent the primordial germ cells. They appear at the wall of the yolk sac near the allantois around the 4th week of development. and they migrate along the dorsal mesentery of the hind gut to reach the genital ridge and invade it around the 6th week of development and stimulate the genital ridge to form the indifferent gonads. Upon arrival of the primordial germ cells to the genital ridge, the primary sex cords are formed. What happens is that the coelomic epithelial cells proliferate again and condense, and then they penetrate deep in the underlying mesoderm. Thus forming what is called the primary sex cords. Okay, now how the gonads differentiate into testis or ovary. Let's start first with the testes. So the embryo is genetically male, means that he has XY chromosomes. On the Y chromosome, there is a region which carries the SRY gene or sex determining region on the Y chromosome that affects the indifferent gonad and transforms it into testes. So this differentiation of the gonads from indifferent stage to testis occurs around the 7th week of development. Then what happens is that the primary sex cords continue to proliferate deep and deep into the mesenchyme and form what's called testis cords. These testis cords will interconnect at the medulla and form what's called the reed testis. Later on, the testis cords lose contact with the surface epithelium and become separated from it by a thick fibrous capsule, which is called the tunica albuginea. At the 4th month of development, the testis cords looks like a horseshoe, and they connect by their two ends into the reed testis. At puberty, the testis cords acquire a lumen and transform it to what's called the seminiferous tubules. They are formed of the following. If we enlarge this cut section of the seminiferous tubule, they are formed of spermatogonia, which are derived from the primitive germ cells. They are also contain the Sertoli cells or the supporting cells. They are derived from the surface epithelial cells. And in between the seminiferous tubules lies the interstitial cells of Leydig, and they are derived from the mesoderm. So in summary, first the genital ridge appears and differentiates into either ovary or testis according to the presence or absence of the Y chromosome, which carries the SRY gene or the sex determining region on the Y chromosome. It regulates the testis development. This gene is responsible for regulation of testis development. Also, the germ cells from the yolk sac migrate to the ridges at the 6th week of development and invade the primitive sex cords, which has inducing effect. Because if these germ cells did not reach the ridges, then the gonads will not form. The primitive sex cords remain in male and form what's called testis cords. They lose contact with the surface of the testis, and now the testis is covered by a thick fibrous capsule. It's called tunica albuginea. The seminiferous tubules contain many types of cells like the Sertoli cells, where they are derived from the surface epithelium, and they are supporting cells and the nourishing cells. They are considered to be feeding cells for the sperm. Also, The testis contains the interstitial cells of Leydig. They are derived from the mesoderm and they secrete testosterone. Now, what about the differentiation of the gonads into ovaries? The ovary is formed when the embryo is genetically a female who carries the XX chromosomes. So, because of the absence of the Y chromosome, then there is no SRY gene. That's why the default pathway for the indifferent gonad will be into ovary formation. The differentiation into female ovaries begin at the 8th week of development. Again, the inducer for the differentiation of the gonad is by the arrival of the primordial germ cells. They stimulate the primitive sex cords to form and they extend into the medulla and form the rete ovary. But soon this rete ovary will degenerate. At the 8th week of development, another wave of sex cords arise. It's called the secondary sex cords or cortical cords. They are also derived from the surface epithelium. And they remain close to the surface. That's why they are called cortical cords. At the 4th month of development, the cortical cords break and surround the primary germ cells to form the primary follicles. They remain close to the surface. So if we look at the histology of the ovary, we will find that the primary follicles are composed of the following: the oogonia, which is derived from the primitive germ cells, and this oogonia is surrounded by a layer of follicular cells, which is derived from the surface epithelial cells. So in summary, the genital ridges, which lies on either side of the midline like we mentioned before, and these genital ridges are formed by the proliferation of the coelomic epithelium and the condensation of the underlying mesenchyme, can differentiate into either ovary or testis. Then the germ cells or the primordial germ cells on the wall of the yolk sac migrate to the ridges and arrive around the 6th week of development and enter the primitive sex cords. Due to the absence of the Y chromosome and the absence of the SRY gene, then the default pathway of this indifferent gonad will transform into ovaries. The primitive sex cords will degenerate. Another wave or secondary or cortical cords will form and they remain close to the surface. They are formed of a germ cell surrounded by follicular cells. The descent of the testes. In my previous video, I have discussed the descent of the ovary. The descent of the testis is similar like that, but carries on till it comes out of the body and lie in the scrotum. Testes develop inside the abdomen and then descend into the scrotum through the inguinal canal. First, they have to pass through the deep ring and then through the inguinal canal itself and then get out of it through the external ring. So in this diagram, you can see the developing testes. Okay, this is the epididymis and this is the vas deferens. This is the inguinal canal here. And this is the ligament that will pull the testis downward. This is the gubernacular ligament. And this is the developing penis and this is the bottom of the scrotum. And you can see here the peritoneal cavity. Okay. So, during descent of the testis, it is accompanied by a protrusion of the peritoneum, this one, okay, like a finger-like process comes out of the peritoneum. It's called the vaginal process. Vagina means sheath and process means extension. So, it's like a sheath or extension of the peritoneum that will guide the testis during its descent. Okay, so the more the vaginal process extends downward, the more the testis is moving downward as well. By the 9th month of pregnancy. Now the testis reached the bottom of the scrotum and the tunica vaginalis is forming. So tonic means a cover, and vaginalis, because it is a thin sheath of peritoneal covering, it will wrap around the testis and form another coat of the testis. It's called the tunica vaginalis. Another factor that helps in the descent of the testis is the presence of a ligament called gubernacular testis. It is attached cranially. This blue line here, this is the gubernacular testis. It is attached cranially to the testis and inserts into the region of the genital swelling or the future scrotum. So it has two ends. One attached to the bottom of the genital swelling, it will form the scrotum. The other end is attached to the lower pool of the testis. It shortens because of the effect of the hormones like testosterone. It shortens over time, thus it pulls the testis downwards and also pulls the adductor deferens and the vessels supplying testis downwards as well. Like this. In another picture, this is the peritoneal cavity, and the testis is formed behind the peritoneum. It's first a retroperitoneal structure, lies behind the peritoneum. This is the developing penis, and this is the future scrotum. This is the pubic bone or symphysis pubis. And this yellow line represents the gubernacular testis. So, with further growth, the gubernaculum gets shorter and shorter, thus pulling the testis downward with it. And do not forget that the peritoneum sends a process called the vaginal process that guides the descent of the testis, and just as the testis slides behind it. Okay, now the testis is at the level of the pubic bone, and the gubernacular testis get shorter and shorter. And finally, by the 9th month of development, the testis now lies inside the scrotum, and the gubernacular testis now atrophied and become very, very short. And the vaginal process is transformed into a tonic or a cover around the testis. It is called the tunica vaginalis. So the fate of this structure, the gubernaculum degenerates, and a remnant of it remains at the bottom of the scrotum. We call it vestige of gubernaculum ligament. The word vestige means a remnant. Also, the processus vaginalis, its neck closes. By its neck, I mean that the communication between it and the peritoneal cavity will close, while the rest of it will form a cover around the testis, which is called the tunica vaginalis. What about the anomalies of the descent of the testis? First, we have cryptorchism, when one or both testes do not descend, or mal-descended testes, or ectopic descent. And instead of going down and lying inside the scrotum, they just go in a weird way, like migrate towards the femur, or cross to the opposite side, or remain at the pubic region. Other kind of anomalies related to the descent of the testis is the presence of congenital inguinal hernia. In this case, the processus vaginalis, the neck of the processus vaginalis fails to close. Thus, the intestine can pass through the processus vaginalis, through the inguinal canal into the scrotum, as in this anomaly. These are part of the bowels. They can go through this open pathway of the processus vaginalis and lie inside the scrotum. Or sometimes there is partial closure of the neck, and a cyst is formed containing fluid. In this case, we call this anomaly hydrocele. Hydro means fluid and cele means cyst or cavity. These are the anomalies. Again, the non-descended testis, we call it cryptorchism. Mal-descended testis, two anomalies related to abnormalities in the processus vaginalis, either remains open all through. This might be accompanied by inguinal hernia. And the other anomaly, when there is partial closure, we call it hydrocele. This is the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening, and I hope you like it. Please do not forget to subscribe, like, and share.